Are you wondering what skill can help you navigate your way to a win in Lorcana? Do you want to be the player doing the talking and setting the pace right out of the gate? Well, after this lesson, you'll understand one of the most valuable terms in TCGs. The term tempo in trading card games is one of the most valuable yet frequently misunderstood concepts. But if tempo is so misunderstood, what does it actually mean in Lorcana? Well, in music, tempo is all about pace. Each song has a tempo or speed that it's played. As you listen and feel the kicking bass of the background song, it's impossible to ignore the pace of the song, because the one who controls the pace is the drummer. The lead singer may get all of the attention, but it's the drummer's beat that sets the speed and the rest of the band has to play along. Well, a game of Lorcana will also have a pace that it's played. We're not talking about how fast the players make their decisions. We're referring to how effective the players are at setting up the necessary pieces to get to 20 lore and win first. So who is the drummer of this Lorcana game? It's the player who is better at setting the pace, or the person playing with better tempo. Some card games established before Lorcana have loosely defined tempo as setting the pace or momentum of a game by establishing threats. This idea carries over to Lorcana quite nicely, since most Lorcana strategies also focus on keeping characters in play, and then using them to win the game over time. As for the ready, set, draw definition, we define tempo like this: be the player asking the tough questions and giving perfect answers. If you're looking for a more gameplay-specific definition, it basically means you set up the threats and ask them to deal with them or it's game over. Maximize your ink early and often so that you are the player forcing your opponent to be reactive. Playing with good tempo means you focus on both consistent characters that force your opponent's hand, and when your opponent dares to ask you a question, you have such a short and effective answer that you can get right back to asking the questions yourself. Now that we've described what tempo is, let's quickly cover the 3 T's of tempo tips that help you be the one asking the questions in your next Lorcana game. You'll notice from these 3 tips that typical tempo strategy only works if it's followed from the very beginning of the game. After all, it's up to the drummer to properly kick off a song, right? Let's start with the simplest tip. Take the early lead. The first 3 to 4 turns of a game are crucial for establishing yourself as the leader of the game. It's hard to convince your opponent to play your game if you let them speak first. Inking and playing a card that uses all of your ink through each turn can help you ask those questions like we mentioned earlier. Ideally, you get to go first in your game, but even if you go second, you still have the power to ask tougher questions than your opponent, which brings us to tempo T number 2. Tough questions. Some cards serve as better questions than others. They can do this by either threatening a win so quickly that they demand an answer fast, or they require such a specific answer that your opponent's previous plans get totally messed up. The most important quality a card can have for threatening a quick win in Lorcana is lore. You know, the stuff you only need 20 of to win a game. Well, a character that can quest for 2 lore through the early or middle portion of the game is capable of getting you a big chunk of lore for only 1 turn of action. This means that playing down high lore characters poses the most dangerous question to your opponent, which is, can you afford to let me keep questing, or do you need to spend your whole turn challenging my characters instead? Other stats like strength and willpower can force your opponent's hand too. For example, a Cerberus 3-headed dog may cost 5 ink, but that 5 strength and 6 willpower on turn 5 can dish out and take a lot of hits, unless your opponent has a big character of their own. Cerberus is perfect for setting up the favorable trades we mentioned in lesson number 4. Other qualities that create even tougher questions are ability keywords that mess up your opponent's plans. Evasive makes challenging your characters the wrong answer unless they have their own evasives. Ward means their answers can't be choosy. Singer helps you play higher cost effects with bigger tempo swings even earlier. Even the Bodyguard ability adds a bit of tempo potential to a card. Why, you ask? Well, consider this. You just played a Lilo, which can quest for 2 lore for only 1 ink. That's basically asking this question. Can you clear out my 1-cost character before it gets me way more lore than 1 ink should? Your opponent shouldn't have a hard time answering this. On their turn, a simple flounder could make quick work of this problem with a challenge next turn. But back to your turn. Boom! You throw down a Simba, Protective Cub, and quest away with Lilo. That simple question Lilo asked just became a whole lot more complicated thanks to Simba. The Bodyguard ability may not make a card any scarier by itself, but when working with your own threats, more specific answers are required. Think of it like they're racing you. Requiring specific answers is like throwing a hurdle in their lane. Either jump over it or enjoy the trip. Say goodbye to your shins. Speaking of answers, that leads us to tempo tip number 3, timely answers. Look, inevitably, your opponent is going to demand something from you. It's up to you to give them an answer that makes them regret asking. And the best responses are immediate and efficient. Actions like Dragonfire and Grab Your Swords can typically help with this because they can handle a big problem without using multiple cards. Even better when that action is a song. Then you don't even have to use ink on your answer. These actions may be big and splashy, but even smaller actions like Fire the Cannons and Befuddle can help with tempo because they can respond efficiently to a small problem with only 1 ink. These actions have helpful effects that can happen right when you cast them, but they aren't the only immediate effects in the game. Characters with rush or abilities when played also have a huge impact on the game from the get-go. Rush allows your challenges to happen right away. On-play abilities like those seen on Tinkerbell Giant Fairy and Genie on the Job can gain mega tempo, since they can both provide an answer to a very difficult problem and remain in play to become a threat your opponents have to answer. Cards like these that both solve a problem and become one are some of the most deadly tempo terrors in the game. Even though playing with tempo is a solid strategy for your typical deck, it's not like a card has to be a good tempo play to be a good card. Some awesome cards exist that even lose you tempo when they're played. Cards like Beast Mirror or Friends on the Other Side only draw you cards. Even though they ask 0 questions and solve 0 problems, they are still solid cards in some strategies, because they technically trade tempo now for tempo later. You're skipping the chance to ask a tough question now with your ink and taking that risk with the hope that you have cards left later when your opponent has run out. A similar strategy exists with ramp cards that get you extra ink, like Detective Mickey, One Jump Ahead, and Lantern. They cost you ink now, and you don't get much benefit, but they will make asking tough questions easier to do later. So again, it's like you're trading tempo now for the chance at greater tempo later. It is important to acknowledge that not all strategies consider consistent tempo to be a top priority. Super aggressive, slow and controlling, or extremely specific combo strategies will have their own game plans and moments where they care about their tempo the most. However, for your average Lorcana deck, understanding how your cards can gain or lose you tempo while playing is essential for any Illumineer looking to be the one setting the pace. If you think we did a good job of explaining this concept, then feel free to share this video with someone who you think may need the lesson themselves. If you enjoy this content and would like more, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell so that you'll be notified when we upload. Until next time, this has been Jacob from Ready Set Draw. Class dismissed.